Welcome to session 2 on Unit 300, Leading People, where we're going to be talking about improving performance. What we're going to be talking about is the use of coaching as a method of improving performance. So we'll be looking at some different coaching models, methods, and how it can benefit us in the workplace. So just a quick recap of what we covered in the last session. So in that last session, we looked at leadership styles and we covered some theories and methodologies around different leadership styles. And we looked at the importance of organizational culture. And the bits we're going to look at in this session sort of build into that because it's part of that culture of improving performance that we're focusing on. So the aims of this session, well, the aim is to understand the role coaching plays in the workplace. And by the end of the session, you should be able to describe the benefits of using coaching to support individuals in the workplace and describe how coaching can be used to improve performance of individuals in the workplace. So let's just have a think about why we need to improve the performance in the workplace. So improving performance, why? It sounds a silly question, but from the organization's point of view, we want the best performance out of our people. But as a leader, there's some key factors that improving performance can get us. And one can be engagement, and the second can be motivation. People like to improve. It's a human nature thing, but it needs the right circumstances. Let's just take a look at what we mean by motivation. You may or may not have heard of Hertzberg and his two-factor theory, or sometimes called the dual factor theory or the motivation hygiene factor theory. But what he's advocating is there are two things that motivate people. There's hygiene factors and then there's motivation. Hygiene are around the job, pay, conditions, etc. And we're not focusing on those. But with coaching, we can impact on the motivational side, the work side, by making the work interesting, making it supportive, giving people challenges and responsibilities. And these lead to satisfied and motivated staff. And we can use coaching to impact on those areas. Another thing is what people's expectancy level is. So Vroom's expectancy theory is another theory on motivation, which looks at and as this graphic quite clearly shows, it is a calibration of the effort linked to the performance, linked to the outcome, causes the motivation. So for example, is it worth putting in the effort? Will it lead to good performance? What's the probability of that good performance leading to the outcome that I want? Well, coaching is where we can have an impact on that because we can guide people through the fact of what effort they've got to put in, what performance it will bring, and we can make sure that the outcome is what they expect it to be, therefore causing them to be motivated. And these all help and are reasons why we need to be using coaching and why we need to be improving performance. So let's have a look at some common coaching methods and methodologies. So we're going to look at coaching and coaching models and approaches now. And coaching can mean many different things to many different people, and we're not here to debate that. But coaching is an important skill for a leader. It's about coaching your people to achieve their best. If it's done well, this engages them, empowers them, helps them make better decisions, solve problems better, and develop themselves so that they can progress in their careers. Now, some organisations, and yours might be one, may already have a formal coaching training or approach or have a system in place. However, many leaders just develop their own skills themselves, and sometimes they don't even realise they're doing coaching. As soon as someone talks about coaching, they get nervous and possibly stop doing what they're doing because they think they may get it wrong, they may not follow a recognised approach, and therefore they haven't got the confidence in it, feel they might make a mistake. So we will be going to look at some systems, and hopefully you can use these either to understand some proven techniques, practices, recognise them, or just to recognise and possibly improve what you're already doing so that you can start helping and developing your staff. Or maybe it'll be about introducing it to your organisation. So coaching models, they are simply a predetermined framework so that we can sort of plan and know what to expect. They can be useful to give us a structure or a focus, particularly when we're first starting out or we're trying to improve our coaching skills. As our experience and our confidence grows, the actual model or that structure becomes less and less a factor as each intervention with the individuals that we're coaching drives the sort of focus and structure, and it becomes their session and they're talking, they're thinking, and they're airing their thoughts as they should be. None of these models I think are better or worse, but some of them are just different and they're better in different situations. Really, it's just people giving their own spin on the approach, and we'll look briefly at some of these. You can then do a bit more research based on the ones that are being used within your organisation or you think would be more suited in the situations you're in. There is some handouts on them as well. So in the next couple of slides, we're just going to go through some recognised coaching models. So firstly, before we look at some of these recognised coaching models, let's just make sure we've got some basic agreement. We need to make sure we can distinguish between coaching and mentoring, so that whichever we use is the most appropriate for the workplace or the individuals. Mentoring is normally delivered internally. Coaching can be delivered by both internal and external staff to the organisation, and we'll see why in a minute. But for managers to use either of these effectively, there needs to be a clear distinction about what the role of a coach or a mentor is, because there are subtle differences that will make a massive difference to whether they're successful or not. So rather than going down a route of looking at definitions, we'll just look at some graphics, and we'll look at and focus on the style and focus that differs between coaching and mentoring. So in coaching, the focus is on a current situation or issue, a problem which has been identified in the performance, either by the management or the employee, and it's over a set time period, because we're talking about when we're going to improve that performance by. So it's usually going to be linked to SMART objectives, and those are the sort of things that are needed in those time situations, so people know when they're expecting to see changes. The style is around questioning and drawing out the opinions, the reasons, the actions, so the control remaining with the coachee and talking about just questioning them, getting them to realise themselves. It's about offering them feedback on those questions and on performance as it changes, and then it's about having a structured set sessions, probably in line with those SMART targets, so a set period where we know we're going to wait for and see improvements that we've agreed, and that it's in a structured set sessions, so we know when we're meeting with the people, we know what to expect. Whereas with mentoring, the focus is slightly different. It's about supporting a person's career or their role, and it's ongoing and it's on demand. So it's about that person requesting information from the mentor, coming to them looking for something. And the style, because they are normally mentors are senior or experts in the same field, so someone in your organisation, they will share experiences with you about how they've done it and give you advice about how it happens within the organisation, and they will, the sessions will be ad hoc to meet the mentee's demands. When the mentee comes up against something, they'll come to their mentor and ask for advice, they'll ask for a direction, etc. So a subtle difference, not only in the focus, because one's on a set thing, one's on career focused and general, and then the way the person goes about it in the style. One is about offering experience and advice because they're an expert, the other one is just about listening, giving feedback, and making sure that the coachee is still in control of the situation and solving the problem. So that's an overview of the differences between coaching and mentoring, and they're both elements of development or training, but they offer a different perspective to what we would traditionally call training. Training would normally be what we would think of as a course, something that's as a designed approach to a specific topic or a specific subject, and it might be done as a group. So slight differences, but they're all part of development. So let's have a look at some coaching models. The first we're going to look at is a simplistic model, the GROW model, developed in the 1980s by some business coaches. Its simple approach is sometimes compared to planning a journey, in that you would decide where you're going, the goal, establish where you are, the current reality, explore the possible routes, the options and the obstacles such as traffic jams, hold-ups, the bumps that could come along the road, and then finally you'd have your route and off you would go. Right then, so the first step is around establishing the goal. Look at the situations or behaviours that need to change so that we can structure this into a goal. Remember to use SMART, so specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, and look at what they think it will look like, how it will be achieved, what they will judge as success criteria. And then think about, does it fit into the organisation's goals or team goals? The next bit is about examining current reality. They need to reflect on what the current situation is. This can be quite difficult, but if we haven't fully considered the starting point, we could be missing vital information that will stop us moving to the next step. Sometimes take some time to get through this and fully evaluate the current situation. Then we've got to look at exploring the options, and some of them may have emerged as we looked at what the current situation is, but we need to ensure that we determined at this stage all the possible options, not, oh, that couldn't happen, because they need to be considered at this stage, and then we can possibly, as the coach, offer some options as to why some of them might not happen, and then we could be looking at the obstacles that are in place. What could they be? What constraints could we remove that might make the situation happen? And then finally, it's about establishing the way forward, but really it's about establishing the will or their commitment, because we've got the idea, but we need to make sure they're fully committed to specific actions. And then all that is needed at the end of that is to come up with a date when you will review the progress together. So quite a simplistic model, but gives you a structure to follow. In the resources at the end of this session, there is a video of a mock grow coaching session, just to give you an idea or to flesh that out. And also for all of the methods we're going to go through, there is a handout giving more details in the resources. So on to the next one, which is fuel. So fuel is described as a structured conversation framework and a lot more adaptable and flexible in its uses than grow that we've just looked at. It can be used in many more situations to look at behavioural and psychological differences, and if used in coaching, it can look at behavioural outcomes, challenging assumptions, and also it strengthens the relationship between the coach and the coachee, and that's normally going to be the manager and the employee. We'll look at the differences with grow in a bit more detail in a second, just to emphasize that, but first let's establish what fuel stands for. So fuel, the acronym in this model, stands for frame the conversation, understand the current state, explore the desired state, and then lay out a successful plan. The first one is about framing the conversation. It's about setting an outline, the purpose, the process, the expected outcomes, not of the whole coaching, but of this conversation. This is where it's flexible, and this could be as part of some feedback that you're giving to someone as part of their appraisal or some planning for their future development. And in this way, fuel can be used in much more terms than just goal setting for a coaching session. The next part, step 2, understand the current state, sounds quite straightforward, but here we need to make sure that any assumptions or preconceived ideas of both the coach and the coachee are brought out in the open, so that we can get to the real situation, the real current state. Any underlying patterns, any beliefs that have been creating barriers, or leading to poor results need to be brought out at this stage. So again, we're getting a little bit deeper than just looking at the current state. So the third step, explore the desired state, is really the first point where we're starting to explore, because in the first 2 sessions, framing and understanding, we've just been learning more about the situation, and that has given us a framework to have a conversation with the coachee to start considering what the desired state we want without any surprises. It allows us to address issues of change that are probably going to be required to meet that desired state, and provides us with a consistent framework so there are no surprises. We then move on to laying out a successful plan, because we need to establish a plan. Up until now, we've gone through and learnt a lot about the things, and we've come up with some sort of explanation of what we want to get to. So now we need a plan, but it needs to be a bit more flexible and allow adaptability, because we're working on a situation a little bit more fluent here, and many things may come up that derail us getting to that plan, and we need to be able to use those things and incorporate them without starting afresh. So that's fuel as it's laid out. Quite a quick run through. There's a handout obviously, but I'd just like to talk about its differences with the GROW model, which we just talked about, and I think then we can see it. In GROW, goal would have asked us to set smart targets, and that can be problematic if someone's underconfident or not feeling ready. And fuel is a lot more about having a conversation, framing the context and starting to move into it. It's a softer, tread more lightly approach, which fits better if we're using it, as we said, in performance appraisals, development planning, or behaviours or psychological boosting people's confidence. The next stage in GROW is reality, and that's similar to understand, but has some subtle differences. Reality sounds quite hard, and it can be quite a stretch for somebody who's feeling as if this is too much of the process is too much for them. In fuel, we're asked to just understand and investigate, and again continue to build that relationship. Also, reality in GROW can sound quite subjective from both the coachee and the coach's point of view. It can sound quite harsh. The next one in GROW would be options, whereas here we've got explore. And again, options can sound quite prescriptive. You choose one of these options, and if you watch the video of the GROW session, you will see that that's the point of choosing one of the options. In this one, it's more about gaining an agreement, a commitment. Also, if you lay options down to someone who's quite underconfident, they can feel that they'll have to accept one of them just to get through the next hurdle, and really they're not going to be committed to it. And finally, GROW asks us to start talking about obstacles and constraints, and that can put an unnecessary pressure on somebody who's less confident, or it's a different sort of problem. And this is a more delicate and aspirational approach. Finally, the final session is pretty much the same between GROW, which is way forward, and this one, which is lay out as a plan for success. It's just about being more flexible and adaptable with the fuel approach. More in the handout, and let's move on to look at another model. And now we're going to take a look at the ARROW model. This is a lesser known model created by an Australian transformational coach. It's about the same as the others, about taking aim at the goal, looking at the current reality and reflecting on how we get there and what the actions are. But the keys were the aim. What does the client want? What do they want to happen in that situation? What is the current situation? What currently happens, for example, in the reality when those things occur? The reflection, and this is a key or pivotal stage in this process. This is where they need to reflect on what they've outlined, look at the first two stages and taken stock of what is required and how big the gap is. The next step is options. So as if we're starting to take aim, considering what we might have to do to hit our target, as it were, for the ARROW. And then the final one, way forward. This is now about committing to actions and carrying out those actions as planned to ensure that we hit the target. Very similar, just variations on the others, but the key point in this one, the difference in the wording, I presume, is that pivotal stage, which is the reflection, which is about taking stock of the first two stages and then moving on and clearly splitting it by that reflective section in the middle. Again, you can hover over the A, R, R, O and W and look at them in a bit more detail. So the final model we'll look at is the Oscar model. As I said at the beginning, there are lots of models out there, and I'm not saying that these 5 we've looked at are the best. They're just 5 that have been picked out. This is a solution-based model, so the theory being that you don't look at the problem, you look at the solutions that could be there. So instead of just discussing their causes and their difficulties, you look at what they can do about it. And it goes through 5 stages: outcome, scaling, know-how, affirm action, and review. And there are some subtle differences to this one. The outcome is similar to goals, obviously, and that's looking at, but they do say that the focus should be on differences that can be made, such as increased confidence, self-awareness, getting more respect, or things such as that. The scaling part is probably the biggest difference, because you're asking the person who's being coached to scale themselves from 0 to 10. So 10 being their perfect outcome and 0 being the complete opposite. And very rarely do people scale themselves at 0, which therefore gives you something to work with. The know-how bit is about know-how and resources, and establishing how far, using that scale, how far towards their outcome they are, and identifying what strengths and why they're not at 0 themselves. You can then use that to affirm an action. You can affirm the positive, reinforce the positive bits by reflecting back on what they've talked about, and try and draw out a confirmation of the actions moving forward to reinforce those. So if they're good at something, how they're going to use that more and do that more. The final stage is review, and that's self-explanatory again. And as we've said in others, probably happens at the beginning of the next stage, because it's about reviewing what they have been doing better, what they have improved. And it's about bringing all those together and trying to focus for this person on what they can build on in the strengths they already have. So a lot of those models we looked at are really the same. There's just slight differences, slight variations that fit into different situations or into different organizations, or possibly to do with the individual personalities of the coach or the coachee. And on the next slide, we'll just recap where we've got to with coaching models. So we've examined lots of theories and tools that we can use, but to use any tool effectively, you need the skills. For coaching, we need to call on or develop our skills, our attributes, and our characteristics so that we can be an effective coach. We're going to look at a video as we concentrate on this. So we're going to be concentrating on the skills we need and the attributes and what we can do to develop them. So watch the video, make some notes, and then we'll discuss that afterwards.